We're going to go straight over now to the political editor of The Sun, Jack Elsom. Hello, Jack.
Morning, Kev. How are you?
I'm OK, mate. Let's talk about your colleague, Rod Liddle. He's got a great column in The Sun this morning, page 10, warping an inquiry into rape. Nothing is more wicked. It is a classically eloquent condemnation by Rod of the government's whole handling of this ongoing scandal. There has been no greater criminal scandal in the past 50 years than the mass rape and sexual abuse of young white girls at the hands of middle-aged, largely Muslim men. More than 1,000 kids, etc. He says more than 1,000 kids. He's actually being rather economic with the truth there. We understand that the actual number of victims around the country, mostly vulnerable young white girls, many of them underage, could be as many as 250,000. So Rod really is fizzing with rage here about the way the government never wanted this inquiry. Jess Phillips, the safeguarding minister, said she didn't want it. The Prime Minister, not necessary. Oh, we don't need a national inquiry. Then along came Louise Casey's report. The Prime Minister in early June said, I've read this, I have no choice now but to call a national inquiry, a public inquiry. And here we are, 5 months on, still no chairperson. 4 victims quit the inquiry last week, saying the government's trying to widen the remit so that the finger of blame is not pointed at the ethnicity of the culprits, the rape gang members, and so on and so forth. Basically, Rod saying there is nothing more wicked than the government's attitude to this much needed public inquiry. Your thoughts, Jack?
Yeah, well, summed up brilliantly as ever, Kev. You know, Rod Liddle, I think, reflects the absolute boiling rage on behalf of most of the people in this nation. One of the most shameful stains on our country's modern history, but also often, you know, the crime is bad enough, the cover-up is even worse. And I think that for a Prime Minister essentially had to be dragged kicking and screaming into this national inquiry, to then bungle it so badly, as we have now seen, many people will think is totally unforgivable. You know, at the heart of this, as Rod points out, is the safeguarding minister, Jess Phillips. And listen, you know, I think Jess Phillips is someone that has spent a lot of time, talking about the issue of grooming, domestic abuse throughout her career, gets a lot of hate online, but it doesn't excuse, I don't think, what some of these victims have come out and saying. And you rightly point out that 5 victims last week decided to quit the inquiry. Now, throughout this, the government has said consistently, when it comes to the national inquiry, we will be led by the victims and the survivors. How does that tally up with not even really seeming to listen to the claims and concerns by these 5 victims, one of whom just spoke to you, in which they tell a pretty dismal picture of what it was like being on that panel? They said that it was a toxic environment. They said that their concerns were brushed under the carpet. They didn't want the inquiry diluted to essentially be widened to talk about things beyond the race and ethnicity of the grooming perpetrators, which we know from Louise Casey's report, there's a disproportionate amount of South Asian men who were involved with this. And so I think now the government have got themselves into a position where both of the leading candidates have pulled out, and it could well stretch into next year before this inquiry even appoints a chairperson and gets off the ground. And many people will just think, you know, what the hell are they waiting for? You know, this needs to happen pretty damn quickly. You know, this is a scandal stretching back decades now, and still, when finally we're in a position where we can launch a national inquiry, it's seen that it's been totally fudged.
Indeed, the victims very angry, actually. A couple of the potential chair people of this inquiry. One was an ex-social worker, and the other was an ex-copper. The victims going, no, this is exactly the kind of person we don't want chairing this inquiry. These are the people, not saying that the actual candidates for this job were guilty, but it was social workers and coppers, teachers, local politicians who turned their back, turned a blind eye to what was going on. We don't want one of them being the chair of this inquiry. So that was lead-footed by the government, to say the least. Those 2 candidates have disappeared. They don't want to do the job anyway. But what's going on with Jess Phillips? I mean, the girls, the poor girls, the victims on the victims panel, just saying they will not return to this inquiry unless she goes. I don't know what her interaction with them has been like. That was a private affair, but I saw her last week in the Commons, and she needs to raise her game, because first of all, she effectively called the victims liars. Because the victims are going, well, they won't let us talk about the ethnicity and the religion of the perpetrators, of the gang members. We don't want that. She said, that's not true. We're not widening the remit of the inquiry. Well, they clearly were trying to. But it's her whole attitude, in part, sort of a mixture of being bored by it, finding it tedious, dare I say it, is this another dog whistle issue sort of thing, and being angry about it, very angry. No, her attitude in the Commons didn't coat her in glory, I don't think, and there's a problem with her. These girls will not go back to the inquiry unless she goes. Do you think she has to walk the plank?
Well, in relation to that Commons appearance last week, I think that, it really, maybe across the House shows politics at its worst. It's clearly a very emotive issue. People are very angry about what happened to tens of thousands of young, mainly white girls in lots of towns in this country. But I think there is a way of dealing with stuff from the dispatch box, and it is not to essentially, bellow and slap down any concerns raised by the other side of the House, which I think is what she was accused of doing, especially then to doubt the claims of the initial 4 survivors who quit the panel in that pretty excoriating letter to Shabana Mahmood, in which they said that they didn't believe the panel was now fit for the job, and they didn't think that Jess Phillips was up for the job. In terms of Jess Phillips's immediate future, listen, I think the Keir Starmer probably will stick by her for a couple of reasons. I think, first of all, I don't think he wants to chuck her to the wolves, in a sense, and I think that there is a feeling that that was what would happen if he did ditch her from the post. But also, in terms of a wider issue, which isn't just related to the grooming gang scandal, Keir Starmer has now had a habit of backing people pretty vociferously. The pressure builds, he then cracks, and he then sacks them. I think some are calling it the back crack and then sack campaign.
Back crack and sack.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that he's now getting pretty sensitive, to these allegations. It happened, obviously, Peter Mandelson. It happened with, Angela Rayner and the rest of them. And so I now think that he's trying a bit harder to stick by his ministers and try and weather some pretty strong headwinds. But the problem with that tactic, Kev, is that as the pressure does build, positions do become unsustainable. And at what point do you stick by someone when it's evident that they may no longer not just command the respect of their own side, but also the most importantly here, the respect of the victims? And clearly that is what the government is now at risk of doing by putting themselves on the wrong side of not all the victims, but a fair few of them who have come out in pretty strong voice. They do, I think, expose themselves to the claims. They're not taking this as seriously as they should be.
Yeah, I think Jess Phillips has got one statement to worry about, and that will be the moment when Keir Starmer pledges his full support and his full confidence in her. Then she'll be gone. But ask Peter Mandelson, ask Angela Rayner. When Keir backs you to the hilt, you're finished. Jack, really good to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. Jack Elsom there, political editor of The Sun.